What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video I'm going to be building a Ryzen 5600X RTX 3070 gaming PC build. I'm going to run you through all the parts I selected and why, before showing you exactly how to put it together, and then later on how it performs in around about 15 of the most popular, most demanding titles. Without any further ado though, make sure to get subscribed, but let's just jump into it. Now then, we're going to kick things off installing our CPU into the motherboard today. This is the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. It's their brand new 65 watt, 6 core, 12 thread CPU with some really fast clock speeds, great single threaded performance, and importantly, it's not going to bottleneck our 3070 today, even at 1080p, which has been an issue before. I'm going to be installing it. No! I'm going to be installing it into the MSI X570 Gaming Edge motherboard today. It's got a load of great features, including PCIe Gen 4, built-in Wi-Fi and a built-in rear I/O shield, and also, of course, active cooling for the X570 chipset. Now, to install our CPU today, we're just going to pull up this silver retention arm and line up this triangle on our CPU socket with this triangle on the CPU today. Now, I've got to give a huge shout out to Ebuyer, who hooked me up with a Ryzen 5000 series chip. They saved my bacon and have quite literally made today's video possible. All their links will be in the description below. The next thing to install into the motherboard today is the RAM. This is a 16GB kit of Adata's Spectrix D60G. I think it's actually the most RGB RAM on the market by RGB surface area. It looks awesome, and it's also not too badly priced either. To install it, I'm just going to pull back the retention clips on the second and fourth RAM DIMM slots, which are the ones we need for dual channel performance, and line the notch on the RAM DIMM with the corresponding notches on the motherboard. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and install our M.2 drive today. Specifically, I've got the Seagate FireCuda 510. It's a super fast NVMe drive with read and write speeds at nearly 3.5 gigabytes per second. Once we've removed that M.2 heatsink cover, we can go ahead and retrieve the M.2 drive itself, and simply lining the drive up just like so, and securing it down with this teeny tiny little screwdriver. It's then simply a case of securing the heatsink nicely back down into place, and just like that, we're all sorted. I'm going to move the motherboard and all this clutter to one side so we can go ahead and install it into the case. Talking of which, this is the MSI TD500 Mesh. This particular chassis is the white version, but it is also available, of course, in black, and you can check out that video up here. This case in particular is pretty much as good as it gets at the moment, with a full mesh panel at the front, 3 addressable RGB fans up there as well. All in all, really good build quality, coupled with a price point that simply won't break the bank. Take your motherboard today and check that underneath each of the 9 holes that comes in 3 different rows, that you've got a corresponding standoff in your case. In our instance, this case is all ready to go out the box, which is super useful. The motherboard is then going to slide through the rear of the chassis, no I/O shield installation needed, and the raised center standoff that's hiding under this M.2 heatsink is going to hold the motherboard nicely into place while we secure it down. Install the 9 screws in kind of a cross pattern, go back and tighten them all up at the end, and you're going to be good to go. Okie dokie, with that all sorted, I'm next going to pop the power supply in while everything's easy to access before going ahead and installing the CPU cooler. This is the new Cooler Master MWE650 Gold. It just about sits on Nvidia's requirements, or recommendations I should say, sorry, for the 3070, and it's got plenty of GPU power connectors as well. It's a fully modular unit that's pretty compact and also quite nicely priced, considering the rest of the options that are out there. In terms of the cables that we need to plug in, we don't actually need that many today. A dual 6+2 pin PCIe power connector, the notoriously large 24-pin motherboard power cable, a singular SATA power harness for any RGB controllers we might have, and a pair of 4+4 pin CPU power connectors is going to sort us out quite nicely today. Once you've gone ahead and installed the power supply with these 4 screws just like so, I think it makes sense to plug up the cables and the wires while everything is nice and easy to access. The first is the CPU power connectors, which go to the top left of the motherboard, just like so, followed shortly after by our 24-pin motherboard power cable, which goes to the right-hand side of the motherboard today. It also makes sense to plug up our front panel cables. The JFP1 power reset hard drive indicator LEDs are the fiddliest of the bunch, but if you follow the on-screen diagram, it should make things a little bit easier. If you get these the wrong way around, don't worry, nothing will explode. You'll just have to kind of go back and do it again. HD audio is another one today, which goes to the bottom left of the motherboard and powers our headphone and microphone jacks. Finally, the USB 3 connector is last up. This one is notched, so will only go in one way around. It is a little bit delicate, so be careful, and once again, don't force it. Okay then, the penultimate part before we go ahead and install the graphics card today is our CPU cooler. I've opted for the Cooler Master ML120R. Now, you could go for a 240 or even a 360mm radiator in the front of this chassis, but the price on this at the moment is insane. I'll link everything with the latest prices down below because they do change, they do fluctuate, but it's going to be better than air cooler options today and also give us some nice RGB fans at the front. No, at the rear. Definitely the rear of our chassis today. You are going to need to grab the manual because every CPU cooler is a little bit different, so it always helps to try and follow along. Installing this cooler is really easy. We're just going to grab these AMD brackets and these slot on to the pre-installed plastic mounting hardware, making the whole process really very simple today. Now that the radiator and the fan is nicely installed to the back of the case, I'm just going to grab a little tube of thermal paste before going ahead and fastening the water block on, pretty much just like that. Okay then, it's finally time today to install our graphics card. This is the MSI RTX 3070 Gaming X. AMD have got some great options coming and we'll definitely explore those when they land, but I've got a feeling the 3070 at this price is going to be pretty much unrivaled. This particular card is a bit on the bougie side. It's got a really nice metal backplate with this kind of gunmetal grey GPU exposure and a really beefy 3-fan cooler that should give us plenty of overclocking headroom should we want it. We're going to line it up with the PCIe slot today, and that's going to tell us we need to remove the second and third slot covers. And then it's simply a case of sliding the graphics card into this top PCIe slot and securing down with the 2 screws that we removed with the brackets today. All that really leaves us to do then is to install some PCIe power cables onto the graphics card and then boot this machine up to see how it performs in a boatload, and I mean about 15 of the most popular, most demanding AAA titles. So hold tight, but first let's see how it looks in an epic glam montage.
We can be some. Are you ready for us? 'Cause I'm ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something. Are you ready for us? Oh, 'cause I'm ready for you, ready for you. Are you ready for us? We can be something new. Are you ready for us?
Alright then, now we've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up and of course the process of putting it together step by step. Let's see exactly how it performs in around about 15 of the most popular titles. First up is Death Stranding at 1440p high with DLSS set to performance. You're looking at 198 FPS on average with 90 and 99th percentile results of 177 and 146 respectively. We're actually seeing around about 30 FPS increase here over a 5600X and 3070 combo, meaning the CPU is really pulling its weight. GTA 5 is a similar story, 122, 104 and 90 frames per second for those average 90 and 99th percentile results at 1440p high settings. The game looked really quite fantastic as you would expect and ran buttery smooth. Control is another one of the DLSS and ray tracing titles today at 1440p with RTX on and DLSS set to the more performance mode. You're looking at 135 frames per second with a 90 and 99th percentile result of 109 and 84 respectively. Once again, this is around a 20% upside over something like a 3600X and a 3070, which is really quite mind-blowing. Apex Legends performed as well as you'd expect, 140 44 FPS on average with 131 and 123 for the 90 and 99th percentile results means the game pretty much never went below 123 FPS. That's fantastic. That's kind of like esports level frame rates and should help you get that competitive edge. Call of Duty's Warzone performed pretty well, 125 FPS on average, with 107 and 93 for those 90 and 99th percentile results, once again lining up with the best performing 3070 build that I've built to date, by slightly smaller margins in Warzone by about 11 frames per second, but still an upside. Forza Horizon 4's inbuilt benchmarking mode is a pretty easy game to run, but we all love a good racing game, so here you're looking at 142 FPS on average, with 126 and 113. Overwatch is next up, probably the easiest game to run on the list today, but still we saw some really great performance figures. 255, 231 and 186 frames per second respectively made it a really enjoyable, competitive gaming experience. I did tell a lie though, CSGO's next and that's probably the easiest game to run. Here you're looking at an average of 399 FPS. Yes, I did turn the FPS cap off, this just happened to be the average number, which is kind of crazy. Battlefield 5 at 1440p high settings with RTX disabled sees an average of 128 frames per second with 108 and 97 respectively. Visually the game looked great, ray tracing has a big performance hit in Battlefield 5, so really if you're gaming at 1440p with ray tracing on you probably want a 3080. Minecraft's RTX beta is next up, probably one of the most kind of inconsistent betas I've ever tested, but nevertheless 1440p high settings with RTX on and the render distance set to just 8 chunks because anything more than that causes instability, at least that's what the game says. You're looking 90 FPS on average with 78 and 74 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. Especially if you're doing modded Minecraft or anything like that, do keep away from the beta because it's probably not going to do you any favours. Doom Eternal is next at 1440p Nightmare, not Ultra Nightmare, so there is another settings rung we could have gone to, but even still the game looked great and was performing really well. 206 FPS on average to be precise, with 231 and 200 for those 90 and 99th percentile results, which is incredibly impressive. Rainbow Six Siege is next up, the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, giving us some really nice numbers. At 1440p very high settings, you're looking 270 FPS on average, with 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 231 and 200 frames per second, which is just insane. Talking of insane frame rates, Valorant performed really well, 275 FPS on average, with 255 and 238 for the 90 and 99th percentile results. This is very close to my previous 3070 build, which you can check out in the card section now, and that's because the game really struggles to use all of the GPU and CPU horsepower available, and why does it need to at these kind of frame rates? Fortnite is a personal favourite of mine and that's why I save it till last. 1440p high settings with Nvidia's Reflex and DLSS enabled, set to performance mode, which renders the game out at a slightly low resolution, uses AI to upscale it back up. With RTX disabled, you're looking 220 FPS with 181 and 163 respectively for those 90 and 99th percentile results. Drop down to 1080p and you're probably looking closer to 300 FPS on average, but even still these competitive esports level frame rates at 1440p high settings is just insane. That not only wraps it up though today for the benchmarks, but for the whole video. If you did enjoy it, you know what to do. Give it a big old like rating, make sure to get subscribed if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching though, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.